The moment of truth has arrived. All those games we talked about before mean nothing now because Ohio State is coming to Eugene in one of the biggest matchups in the history of Autzen Stadium. I am Aaron Fentress, hosting Talkin Ducks this week in place of Jordan Kent, but I'm joined, as we always do on this show, by Joey Harrington and Anthony Newman. What's up, gentlemen? How are you guys feeling this week? Other than the fact that I'm hosting. Other than the fact that I'm hosting.
Yeah, all right then. Let's go.
You didn't know, right? Where's Jordan? Newman wouldn't have showed up. Anyway, hey, listen, we talked a lot.
Hold on. No. You don't just get to roll in like nothing to happen. Like, I had my hand up. Jordan calls on me when I have my hand up. Okay, well, you know what? If you're going to host, you need to be paying attention, okay? It isn't the Aaron Fentress show, okay?
Is it?
Where is Jordan?
Wait,
where is he? The biggest week of the year, and he doesn't show up?
This is the Aaron Fentress show right here. Okay, Joey, what would you like to say?
I just want to know where Jordan is. That's it. The biggest game of the year, potentially the biggest game in Autzen history, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, and Jordan can't even show up.
He may or may not be duct taped and bound in the back of a car. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we've spent all season nitpicking the Ducks, talking about their offense and defense. Dylan Gabriel, are they really good? Are they not good? But now we're going to find out for sure because Ohio State's coming. This is the game we've all been waiting for. So my first question for you guys, we'll start with Newman. Is this truly the biggest game in Autzen history? I mean, rankings mean something, but at some point, sometimes they don't. But what do you think?
Well, I think we need to slow down a little bit. Well, as a football team, I mean, us fans, alumni, we're all excited about this. But it's still early in the season. They're ranked 2, Oregon's ranked 3rd. If Oregon loses, it's not the end of the world. With the new playoff system, that one loss doesn't really hurt you as bad as it used to. But still, you talk about a top-notch program coming into Autzen Stadium, first time ever for Ohio State. Yes, this is a real big game for sure.
And Joey, game day is coming, of course. You have the 2 highest-ranked teams in the history of a stadium they ever played against each other. You've played in some huge games, obviously, at Autzen. Where does this game rank for you?
It depends on what's your barometer. Barometer? What's your thermometer? Whatever. What's your ometer?
What's your measuring stick?
Yeah.
It is, correct me if I'm wrong, the only time that 2 top 5 ranked teams have played at Autzen. I think I have that right.
Correct.
But it reminds me a lot of the conversations that we had the last time they played Ohio State. And we're talking about, that's the biggest win in the history of Oregon, and then the conversation at the end of the year was like, well, hold on, like what happened, right? You stumble along the way and all of a sudden that game doesn't mean as much. It's an incredibly important game in the sense that, 1, the whole country's watching. 2, this is really our first introduction into the Big Ten, right? Hey, welcome to the conference, heavyweight against heavyweight. A chance to, prove that we belong here, right? Because that's what Oregon has been trying to do for the last, 25 years, right? We've been close. We've been close a couple times. But we haven't been able to break through. So could this be the catalyst in a season that could put us, where we've been dreaming about for the last 3 decades? Sure. But if you're looking at it in terms of, is this game the most meaningful in the history of Autzen? I mean, man, I like to think that Masoli running over that dude at Oregon State on 4th down was pretty meaningful.
Yes.
Right? I'd like to think that, Keenan Howry taking that punt, against Oregon State was pretty meaningful. Like, there are a lot of games that have gotten Oregon to places that we had not been previously, but they weren't against, the 17-time national champion Ohio State Buckeyes, who are ranked number 2, and, the top of the conference the new conference we just joined. So, yeah, I don't know. It just kind of depends on how you look at it.
I failed to mention we're going to have George Wrighster and Verone McKinley on later, but let me chime in on this because when Oregon beat Ohio State a couple years ago, people were literally, like you said, calling it the biggest win ever, even over big bowl wins. It just drove me absolutely bonkers because that was just silly. And you and I talked about this, Joey, back then, that it doesn't matter how big the game was in the moment if it doesn't lead to something greater. And then they turn around, they struggle a little bit with Stony Brook, and I made the warning. I'm like, they play like this, they're going to drop a game to just an average Pac-12 team, and boom, a week or 2 weeks later, they lose to Stanford. And then they end the season, right, getting blown out twice by Utah. So who really remembers the Ohio State win other than for a regular season game, you just take it as its individual moment. Yeah, biggest win in history. They went on the road to Ohio State, but it didn't lead to anything. So if they win this week, they would have won the biggest game in the history of Autzen, but does it lead to something? For example, when they beat Michigan in 2003, I think Michigan was ranked number 3, right? And then what happened after that? They lost like 4 or 5 or something.
Yeah.
It was like they were on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Fife is on the cover. They were being hyped. Oh my God. And then they just fell to pieces. So yes, biggest game in history on paper, but will it lead to something we won't know for months?
And that's the thing you just said. Is it the biggest game in the history of Autzen? Yes. Will it be the most meaningful game in the history of Autzen? Give us another couple months. We'll tell you.
It's too early.
All right, let's. There was a game that was played this past week. I guess we got to kind of reference it a little bit. They beat Michigan State on Friday night. Let's start with you, Anthony. And just see if you can go a segment without saying they got better. I'm going to challenge you on that.
Okay.
But did you feel like they showed enough in that game to make you feel like they're ready for an Ohio State?
When the defense plays like they did, yes. You have to have a defense when you play against good football teams. Good football teams that want to run the football, which Ohio State will run the football. Oregon has a defensive line. Unlike in the past, they've had a couple of guys. There's a gang of defensive linemen for Oregon that are playing well, which matches up with the linebacker crew behind them and then the secondary. So they're playing well as a team. Michigan State, they're not a great football team, but I think Oregon did what they needed to do. And, Michigan State didn't score until the fourth quarter. And then, as well as, I think Oregon could have had another, maybe 14 points in the red zone if Dillon didn't throw those interceptions. So the score could have been different. But they took care of business. No, there's a lot to work on. It's still early in the season. But when you have a defense, and your defense shows up every weekend, okay, you have a chance to win any game.
Yeah, they completely shut down Michigan State's running game, 59 yards total rushing. Of course, we talked before the game, Child's probably not ready for a setting like that. He proved that when he didn't secure the ball at the 1 yard line, right? But Joey, what was your takeaway from that performance by Oregon?
My takeaway was I saw exactly what I've been waiting to see from this Oregon defense, and specifically the Oregon defensive line, right? We've talked the last couple of weeks about the strength of this defense was supposed to be the D-line. Like we were surprised at how well the secondary had been playing. Linebackers have been very solid, but the defensive line had been competent, but not dominant like we had expected up to this point. Jordan Birch was absolutely a man among boys. Like I was sitting there on the couch watching it with Emily and Jack, and Emily was like, "How big is that guy? And how fast is he moving?" Like that was the Jordan Birch that was like, "Yeah, he's 6'5", 290 pounds, and he's doing that." It's like, yes, that's what we've been waiting to see. That is the dominant defensive line that we have expected to show up. And if that D-line continues to show up the rest of the season, we're going to see similar outputs. Like this is the thing that like you start comparing numbers, and I'm sure we'll get to this and when we're picking games, but like Ohio State has been dominant defensively in terms of points given up. But I haven't really seen they've just been really, really good everywhere. I don't think they have anybody in the top 50 in tackles for loss in the country. One player in the top 25 for sacks. One person for interceptions. They've just been really, really good. When you have a defensive line that can create those type of negative plays, that can get sack fumbles, that can get big momentum, tackles for loss at home, Autzen, crowd, like those are the things that can vault a team over the top. So I love what I saw from the defense, especially the timing of it. Like, hey, this is what we've been waiting to see. They showed us. Now we got the big test coming up.
Yep.
All right, we're going to take a break now, but we'll be back with a lot more, including a breakdown of Dillon Gabriel, who threw a couple of interesting interceptions against Michigan State.
I just think that at times, my eyes get bigger than my stomach, in the red zone. And like I said, there's things that I've continued to learn, but obviously God's want to continue to teach me the lesson, and I keep making that decision. So at a certain point, there's just things you got to get better at and continue to emphasize. But, you look at, those 2 drives, how different of a game it'll be. And that's what we're striving for, those 5 to 10 plays that could be the difference of the game. Thank God we have a great defense. Thank God our O-line and our running backs are running really well. But like I said, in the tight games and in games that you need to be 100% scoring in the red zone, you can't have things happen like that.
That's Oregon quarterback Dylan Gabriel talking about his struggles against Michigan State. Here's an interesting stat for you guys. He has 3 interceptions already this season. Last 2 seasons, he only threw 6 in each season. However, his interception percentage is 1.8 this year compared to 1.6 last year. He's throwing a little bit more than he has in the past, but giving away points in the red zone, something a quarterback cannot do. Joey, how would you evaluate his performance thus far, given the fact he's had a few mistakes here and there?
Whew, that was a lot of stats. Here's my evaluation. You can't do it. You can do it against Michigan State. They're not good enough to score with you. You can afford to make those mistakes against lesser opponents. They are lucky that the defense played so phenomenal and it didn't become a game like, Idaho or Boise where you let a lesser team hang around. You can't do it against Ohio State. I mean, it's there. He was spot on in that those are the plays that decide these close games. When you are trying to beat the best, you truly have to be at your best. And those were, is he still a phenomenal quarterback? Absolutely. Could he still take Oregon to a national championship? Absolutely. But he made 2 mistakes in that game that were gut punches that he just can't do this week. Pretty simple.
And Newman, sometimes, for a quarterback, the receiver looked open, right? Yeah. Until a defensive back flies over and makes a play. And as a former defensive back yourself, were those situations where maybe the defense sort of not let the guy be open, but the defenders knew that they had the guy covered, but Dylan didn't? And how do you try and manipulate a quarterback like that?
Well, the scouting report on Dylan is he thinks he can make every throw. Which he makes a lot of good throws. I mean, I'm seeing him throw the ball over the middle of the field between 2 defenders. It's like, wow, he made that? Ooh, oh, wow. So as a defensive back or as a linebacker, you're sitting there looking at that going, okay, he thinks he can make this throw, so I'm going to set him up a little bit. I got some quickness. I know when he releases that ball, I'm taking off to go get it. But I want to entice him to throw that football, which he does. When I look at these mistakes by Dylan, they're correctable mistakes. He's a veteran quarterback. He understands, okay, I can't do that in a game like Ohio State, someone, or maybe a Michigan. Well, Michigan's not as good as there. Anyway, it's a different story. And you're taking points off the board. Luckily, he said this. He has a supporting cast, the defense. And he has running back Jordan James that is just running all over the place. So, he has to, slow down a little bit. Okay, hey, if I can't get the touchdown, let's get the 3 points. In this type of game, 3 points are important.
Here's the thing too, guys. Like I mentioned it a couple times that a lot of this season has been quick screen, bubble, dink, dunk, fade up the sideline, right? There was really only one real game against Oregon State where I felt like he was working the middle of the field. Sometimes you got to press that line to know how far you can go. And then you got to cross it and say, okay, that's too much. Let me dial it back a little bit, right? Because Oregon isn't going to win the games they want to win by him just dinking and dunking all year, right? They'll win a lot of games. If he completes 81% of his passes, then they're going to win a lot of football games. But it's going to take him pushing a ball into tight coverage. It's going to take him making a throw that you say, oh my God, that's it right there. Like there are going to be 3, 4, 5 moments this year where he's going to have to grab just literally grab the receiver and say, get here. I'm going to put the ball there. I don't care what the coverage is, right? sometimes you have to push that envelope in order to feel where you're comfortable. Like, okay, I can do that, but I can't go that far, right? So I actually kind of like the fact that he tested those limits a little bit. The fact that he said, hey, I'm going to try and make a tight throw on the goal line there. Guy, DB cut in front, picked it off. All right. Now I know, right? Now I know I got to put the ball here. And it's almost kind of like a little bit of trial and error and I should say I like that because he is going to have to make, let's call it 5 throws like that this year if they're going to win the games that they want to.
So Newman, let's say you're the Ohio State defensive coordinator. You're coming in with a defense. I'm looking at some numbers here. Number 8th in sacks, 3.4 per game. You're 3rd in rushing defense at 72 yards allowed per game. You're only giving up 6.8 points per game, 202 yards per game. You probably feel like you can handle the rushing game of Oregon decently. I mean, Oregon's 67th in the country. How are you going to try and get Dillon Gabriel to make mistakes if the running game isn't there? And if he hasn't really shown really in his career that he could elevate a team against someone like Ohio State, other than they did at Oklahoma, they beat Texas last year. And he had, I think, 400 yards total offense in that game. So what do you do as a DC to try and manipulate Dillon Gabriel?
Well, we're going to try to flush him out of the pocket. I think a lot of his interceptions happen when he's running out of the pocket. When he's in the pocket, he's going to tear you apart. So we got to get him out of the pocket. And yet he can hurt us with his legs. That's what scares me as a defensive coordinator. You got a quarterback who can run, but Dillon Gabriel doesn't really want to run. He wants to throw the ball down the field, and he wants to make that great throw. And again, going back to his mistakes, it looks like during those mistakes, he's flushed out of the pocket throwing the football. And so that's what we're going to try to do. We got to get him out of his stance, okay, and get him out being comfortable. We got to have him be uncomfortable and running for his life.
So, Joey, real quick before we go to break, let's say Ohio State does a good job slowing down Oregon's run game and Dillon finds himself in a lot of 2nd and 3rd and longs. Do you think he's capable of making the plays you just talked about against an Ohio State defense that's going to be coming after him, especially if they have down and distance advantage?
Yes. Yeah, I do. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that I do. I've seen him make the throws. We've all seen him make the throws. We've all seen him be an incredibly successful collegiate quarterback in big-time games. That's who Dillon Gabriel has been up to this point in his career. And the only reason we're talking about this is because he pushed the envelope last week and he got burned, right? So he dials it back. He knows what he has to do. There's nothing that I've seen from him that even gives me an inkling of doubt to say, I don't know if he could actually do that. He's one of the best quarterbacks in college football, and there will be times this year where it gets put on his shoulders, and he's going to do it.
All right, we're going to take another break, and up next, we're going to add another duck to the panel. George Wrighster, who told me back in 2001 he was open all day long, and Joey just never looked at him.
You're right. That's true.
Next up, we welcome in former Oregon tight end George Wrighster, who played with Joey Harrington on the 2001 team, arguably one of the greatest 2 or 3 teams in program history. He is the host of the Unafraid Show, which you can find on YouTube, and he hosts a show called Nightcap on Mad Dog Sports Radio on Sirius XM. Also, he's my good pal, George. Now, George, I told Newman a couple weeks ago when we had your clip.
I don't want to hear it.
I said, George and I are cool. And Newman was like, yeah, right. So you tell him that we're boys.
First of all, Aaron, when you introduce, you got to put a little more excitement in your voice, man, especially if it's your boy coming on, right? So, but me and Aaron are cool.
Excited.
Yeah, see, me and Aaron are cool, Anthony. I'm telling you, we are. Because I understand who he is, and that was the impetus for that tweet a couple weeks ago when I said, "Yo, Aaron, you were doing all this tweeting the first 2 games. Where was you at game number 3?" So I understand him, and once you understand Aaron, it is much easier to deal with Aaron.
Can you help me understand Aaron?
I've known him for a long time. I've known him for a long time, and that's why I know Aaron. Aaron, please quit pulling people. You ain't fooling nobody, Aaron.
Okay. Anyway, all right, George. Let's start. You texted me, I think, after the game, or you wanted to talk or something, and I didn't have time for you. I was like, it's George.
How dare you?
But
okay, go on. I'm gonna let you finish telling your version. Okay.
Give me your impression of the Ducks against Michigan State, and do you think they've shown enough the first 5 games to feel like they're ready to handle an Ohio State?
I believe that they've shown.
He hesitated.
No, I believe that they've shown exactly what Ohio State has shown. If you look at both of these teams, they're both 5-0. The best team that either one of them has played has been Boise State. That's been the best thing on the schedule so far, a top 25 team, the only one. So if we're going to ask this question about Oregon, I think we still have to ask this question about Ohio State as well. Because when we look at the rest of the top 25, when you have had teams that haven't really played a tough schedule and then they've run against some sort of resistance, it ain't necessarily went well. But this is one of those Georgia, Alabama games. Somebody's got to win. Somebody's got to lose. And at the end of the day, you want the Ducks to pass this test in terms of looking good on defense, the level of physicality, and the level of playmaking on the offensive end.
George, help me.
So,
hold on. So here's what I keep coming back to is like, we've seen pieces of it, right? We've seen the run game. We've seen Dillon Gabriel complete 97% of his passes. We've seen the defensive line, take over a game like they did against Michigan State. We've seen the secondary. That gives me hope, but it doesn't necessarily give me like the resolve of like, this is in the bag. This is good. For me, no. I've seen all those pieces at certain times. Now they got to put it together.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference in the thing that I think that has given people trouble this season in terms of Oregon fans. Number one, expectations breed disappointment. The expectations are not to be a top 10 team, is not to be a top 15 or a top 5 team. The expectation is to go to the playoff and potentially win a national championship. That's the expectation. So anytime that those are raised to that level, what you're expecting to see is not what we've seen, which is we've seen, like you said, Joey, the secondary's been good at times. The defensive line, so the defense has pretty much consistently been good all year. But this offense, which is what Oregon has really hung its hat on since we've been there, Joey, is that it's not been as congruent and it's not been as, free flowing and consistent. Like we've seen, there have been times where we've seen extended drives, and then there's been times where we haven't. And then there's been times like last game where we throw 2 horrible interceptions in the red zone. So I think what Duck fans want to see, number one, is a win. But number 2, they want to see and believe that there's a team that can play and put it all together in one game.
All right, Newman, I'm going to start with you on this question here. How important is this game for Dan Lanning? Because he really doesn't have a signature win. He kind of got screwed in that really with the Fiesta Bowl matchup, which was horrible for him. But this is clearly, the biggest game he's coached in for this team next to the Pac-12 championship game. How important is it for him to come away from this game with a victory?
Well, first of all, let me back up. George, the real Aaron, he'll ask you a question, then won't let you talk. So that's what he does. But anyway, it's too early in the season right now.
Okay, that's great, Newman. So, George, what? No.
All right now, Aaron. All right now. I know where you live, remember? I just think it's too early in the season. I mean, yes, every game is an important win. You need to win all your football games. Is that going to happen? I don't know. This game is really important. Game day is coming. Ohio State, first time in Autzen Stadium. They're ranked number 2. Yeah, big game. But is there more games after this one? Okay, are there more games that mean something after this?
Yeah, that's the thing, Newman, is like the question is about legacy, right? The question is about Dan Lanning and how he's perceived and what is his legacy. If they lose this game and then still go to the playoff and win the national championship, his legacy is going to be the first coach to win the national championship, and no one's going to care about this game, right? Like, so that's why these kind of questions that Aaron asks are so stupid, and it just really bothers me that we would have these discussions.
Joey, you could not be any more right. It's like, what does this mean? Is this a signature win? If Oregon wins this game, yes, this would be noted as a big win. But then if you turn around and you lose
Thank you.
To an unranked team in the, on the back half of the season, is that going to be okay? No. This season is bigger than just this one particular game. This season is bigger because it is about the playoff. It is about getting into the playoff and then, showing your stuff there. And this season, teams are going to have a mulligan. And now we didn't expect, damn near all the mulligans to get used up last weekend on unranked teams. But this is one of those games and where I was a big proponent of the expanded college football playoff because number one, 4 teams was not enough. But I want to encourage, scheduling and make the season mean more as the season goes along. And we're getting that right now because atop the Big Ten standings is who? In Indiana, I think, is atop the standings right now. So now it's going to put more pressure on everybody to win games and get into the Big Ten championship. So now you can get an automatic berth. So that means that the games on the back half of the season are still going to be highly important, but it's not, winner take all like it would have been last year.
All right, first of all, I was trying to be the nice host, but since y'all want to come at me, I got to bring it back at you. George, when Oregon beat Ohio State a few years ago, that was not the song you were singing. You were praising Mara, you were praising the program. We're there, we're contenders, we're off of that one regular season win, and it was considered a monumental moment, which you called it as well. And I'm not saying, I agree with you guys. If you win Saturday, but then you fumbled later, it doesn't matter. But the question is legitimate because Dan Lanning
Aaron, you have missed the boat
yet in this program.
Aaron, you are comparing apples to rainbows, buddy.
No, it's exactly the same thing.
Hold on. The reason why that Ohio State game meant so much at that point in time is because of where Oregon was. We were still at a point in September 11th, 2021. That was still now can we not only beat big teams, but can we travel on the road and take it? And that was a believe game. And they went to the shoe and won. So, yes, that was a moment because Ohio State, think about the last few times Oregon had played Ohio State before they went to the shoe. They lost in the national championship in 2015. They had lost in the Rose Bowl when Terrell Pryor and the time before that as well. So now that was one of those, we can hang with these boys and we are just as good. And now that you match the recruiting rankings with what Ohio State has been doing, now this looks like this is no longer one of them statement wins about your program because that already happened. This is one of those, raising up your leg and putting it on somebody else's fire hydrant. It's one of them type of games.
Okay, George. The team had already been to the national championship game twice. The biggest win in program history was beating the defending national championship team, Florida State, with a Heisman winner and number 1 overall pick. So they had already shown right then they could dance with the big boys. They didn't need the Ohio State win. Plus, after the season after that fell apart. And now this year, you're hosting Ohio State. So you have an advantage there in that you're not going on the road. You're hosting them. So you kind of better win that game. No, that's the question.
No, this is not a better win that game because the circumstances are different, Aaron. It was for all we were in not a college football playoff system. It was for all the marbles at that point in time. This is a big regular season game, but this is not going to make or break the season, win or lose. You want to perform well, but this season, this is about performing well at that managing your regular season and peaking at the end of the season when it's time to come for the playoff. That's the difference, Aaron. And I understand that you want to find a way. Oh, let's find a way to criticize what's going on with the Ducks. Find a way to make it negative. But this is a big game, Aaron. There's no way around it. This is a big game. But there's a difference between a big game and a statement in terms of going to the shoe. Because everybody in the nation believes that Oregon can compete with anybody at this point in time. But at that point in time in 2021, Oregon was like 14-point underdogs. We are in a totally different universe right now, Aaron Fentress.
Hey, George.
Therefore, you should win.
George. No, Aaron, hold, George.
Go ahead.
You want to come over for dinner tonight, man? Come on over, man. You come over and hang out with me. Come over.
Because Aaron won't let common sense get in the way of his arguments sometimes.
Oh, thank you. About time.
I'm right. Joey, you got anything to add to this? Are you dominating yourself in chess?
Oh no, you guys are playing checkers. I'm playing chess.
All right, well, we have to go to break. Thank goodness. I regret calling George now, but that's okay. Hopefully he learned something. Up next, we're going to have another former Duck on. A little younger, less ornery as George and Verone McKinley. Stay tuned. All right, up next here on Talkin Ducks, we have former safety Verone McKinley, who had the game-clinching interception against Ohio State back in 2021. Verone, welcome to the show. How you been, man?
I'm good. I appreciate y'all for having me.
Definitely. Look at all those shoes back there. What we got going on there?
Just shoes from over the course of, collecting them, and I like to wear a lot of shoes. I like fashion. That's me. And then some cleats, some jerseys, just, good little setup.
Yeah, wait till you have children like me. You won't be able to afford that stuff. Anyway, just kidding. So, Verone, let's start with that game in 2021. Clearly one of the biggest, if not the biggest, regular season win in program history. What went into that for you guys? How were you able to pull that off?
What went into it was a lot of preparation, and then just a mindset going into that game and realizing, this is a big game. They have a lot of, guys that are seen as first round talents and all of that. But at the end of the day, we have the same thing. And even though we didn't have KT and, some other guys, it didn't matter for the team itself. And then for myself personally, I knew going in that this is the moment. The moment is never too big for someone like myself in a game like this. Let's go make it happen in front of everybody. It's going to be on national TV. Nobody expects us to win. So why not go out there and send a message and do what people think we can do?
So, okay, hold on now. You said something there that George and Fentress were arguing about a second ago when Newman and I just kind of checked out. You said that people didn't think we could, right? So, and we've been having the discussion about the importance of this game, right? And kind of that relationship of where Oregon fits in the picture, and what does a win mean now if you lose later, or if you lose now and then, make the playoff. Like, did you honestly feel like people didn't think you could go in and beat Ohio State?
Oh, 100%.
Really?
We have a quarterback that he played in 2 games prior. We had just had a tough game against a Fresno State team that some would say is nowhere as close to being as good as Ohio State. The first round receivers, of course, big noon kickoff. It's really 9:00 in Oregon. It's noon in Columbus. All of those factors and outside noise and details had people thinking we could not win this game. Then you find out our top 5 overall pick is going to be out, and you didn't hear about CJ Verdell. You weren't talking about Verone McKinley. It was just, can the Ducks? I mean, sure, maybe they can do it, but going into a hostile crowd of 100,000, they've never really been in this type of situation before. So I think 100% we were doubted to win that game.
And it's funny because I forget about, I think of it, 'cause I'm old and I can't remember things, but I think of it in the context of Oregon, and Oregon is a program but you're right, Thibodeau was out that game. I see him on the street clothes on the sideline, and it was Anthony Brown at quarterback. How do you think that Oregon is viewed? You've been in NFL locker rooms here recently. How is Oregon viewed? It's kind of that. I think what we're trying to figure out is Oregon globally, I think, is viewed as more accepted, or not quite there. But that game might have been different. How is Oregon viewed in NFL locker rooms right now?
So of course, everybody knows about the uniforms. Uniforms are great. We're always going to be fast, and we've started to have this identity of becoming a physical team. I think right at about 2019 is when we hit that stride of we can be physical with pretty much anybody in the country, but also the team that they can't win the big one. I think that's just the reality of it. It's always, we'll be super close and we'll be a game or 2 away. It was like that when I was in school. It's been like that before you.
Since I was in school,
you pulled it off, but there's always that narrative over the past few years of that we can't win the big one. And so we're going to get there. And I think we just have to get over the hump of that. And so in the NFL locker room, that's exactly how we're viewed. People's going to talk about this, that, and the third. And it's like the Pac-12 was weak, all of that. And it's like you see these Pac-12 teams in all these different conferences right now playing pretty good football. So it's hard to say that.
All right, so when you guys played in that game, Ohio State put up a lot of yards through the air, clearly. This passing game has a couple really elite receivers. How do you see Oregon matching up against Ohio State's offense altogether, let alone the passing game?
So I think the matchups are very even. Of course, we're always going to be a focus on the secondary versus the wide receiver basically. Like that's probably the big matchup everybody's going to want to see. And I think, Jabbar coming from UW, Nico Reed, Johnson in the slot, and then the safeties. I mean, they're going to have their hands full for sure, but I think there's a lot of experience back there. And I think there's guys who are kind of ready to step up to the challenge. Oregon's defense has done pretty well the past few weeks. I think they'll be suited and booted and ready to go on that side. But then even from a offensive standpoint, it's a matter of putting games together. Like the offense is talented, 100%. They have receivers, they have an O-line. The O-line's starting to get their camaraderie together and really start to play better. And then they have running backs. Like it's all there. It's just a matter of putting together a complete game. And I think that with Dylan Gabriel and Tez and just everybody, it's time to really open it up and make those plays. We can't have any drops. We can't have the turnovers in the red zone. Like these are drives that in a game like this, you have to finish those type of drives, because if you don't, it could hurt you later on. This isn't an Idaho. This team that they're going against will deliver down the stretch compared to some other teams who couldn't. So,
Newman, I want to ask you this: when you obviously played safety in the NFL and at Oregon, when you play inferior offenses and they don't have the running game to really keep you off balance, other than Boise State, and the receivers aren't elite and the quarterbacks are shaky, and then you go up against a team like this, which can just destroy you any way they choose to if you are not playing good football, what's the trap there for the defense mentally? I mean, you can't fall into a false sense of security because Newman keeps saying you're getting better and you're looking good against teams that can't really do anything offensively.
I don't think there's a trap. I think you have to know what you need to do to stop that opponent. Like Ohio State, for me, it's you stop the running game. You have to stop the running game. Otherwise, it's going to be a long, long afternoon or evening, I should say. Certain teams, there's no identity. There's no culture. Ohio State has a culture. They have an identity. With Chip Kelly, they want to run the football. They're going to run the football. So as a defensive back, as a safety, I got to know, okay, yeah, they're going to run the football. They're trying to get me with some play action from time to time, but I need to come up and make some hard tackles. These guys haven't been hit all season. I need to come up and hit some of these guys like they haven't been hit before and make a statement. That's what you need to do.
All right, Verone, let's get your prediction. And I'll admit, I was one of those people who did not think you were going to win at Ohio State in 2021 at all. You guys proved me and a lot of people wrong, and that's fine. I don't root against Oregon. I just make my objective observations. And I don't think they're going to win this week either, but of course, I could be wrong. But Verone, what's your prediction?
You really believe that?
He's a Duck hater. We've established that he is like the biggest. You're a Duck hater, and you were a punter. You were a punter, and you're a Duck hater.
But I didn't think they were going to win in 2021, and they won. So, hey.
A couple of things. The trap question, and just my 2 cents, the trap is trying to do too much because it's a big game, because you know that all the NFL scouts are going to be there. Guys not doing their job, this is the pivotal moment of either you're going to lose your composure and unsportsmanlike conduct penalties and personal fouls from just it being such a big game and then trying to do too much. Sometimes you don't need to just throw the check down on defense. Just stay in your gap. Stay on your man. There's no reason to come up. Like things like that are all into when offense is fully explosive. That's the trap. But my prediction, I think it's going to be a slugfest. I definitely think it's going to go back and forth. I think the teams are pretty well matched. I think the crazy thing is I think Autzen's going to help Oregon prevail. Like I think we'll see some pre-snap penalties. I think we'll see, the defense not being able to get their calls out and start getting flustered. And I would love to see our offense use a little bit of tempo to kind of keep them on their toes a little bit. As a defensive player, tempo is like one of the worst things you can see because whenever you get tempo, it's hard to communicate and it's hard to get lined up. And if you can't do those two things, it's kind of hard for you to execute on defense. So my prediction, I don't have a score necessarily. I think Oregon will win. I think it won't be as high scoring as people think. Like it's not gonna be like 45-49 or anything like that. I think it'll be a closer matchup where it's, 35-21 type of thing. So that's my prediction.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Well, thanks, Verone, for joining us. Next up, we're going to give our predictions on this big game. You already know what I think is going to happen, but I'll give you a score. And the other guys, maybe we'll give you scores as well. Next up on Talkin Ducks.
Ventress hates the Ducks.
I do not hate the Ducks. Welcome back to Talkin Ducks. And now it's time for our predictions. I'm going to save mine for last because it'll be the one that's correct. Let's start with Joey first. Joey, who you got in this game and why?
I have Oregon. Here's why. Like Verone said, a lot of the matchups are going to be pretty good. They're a very evenly matched team. I loved how the defensive line played last week. I did. I mean, I think that's going to be the difference. Verone mentioned it, the crowd at Autzen. It's going to be 28-28 with about a minute and a half left to go in the game, and Ohio State's going to have the ball, and Jordan Birch is going to come off the edge with a sack fumble, and we're going to recover it, and Autzen's going to go crazy, and Sappington's going to kick a field goal. Central Catholic Rams, 31-28 at the buzzer.
31-28. Wow, okay. And Newman?
Well, this is going to be a dogfight for 4 quarters. I also will pick Oregon by 6. I'm looking at the quarterback position. Defense wins championships. I get that, but now we're talking about just one game. And Dylan Gabriel, I think, is the better quarterback than Will Howard. Will Howard is a good quarterback. He's just an athletic kid. But Dylan has that experience, been in big games before, played in big games, understands the situation, and he has a supporting cast. And then when we talk about Autzen Stadium, I think it's big. I think when you travel, what is it, 2,000 miles, 2,500 miles, it takes its toll sometimes. It really does. You might not think it does, but you're not sleeping in your same bed. You're on the bus. Those little things, the details. So I think the advantage goes to Oregon by 6.
Okay. Well, first of all, one of the things that we've talked about all season was how Oregon kept not looking great against certain teams. But the bottom line is they were doing what? They were winning those games. And you saw the last 2 weeks, how many teams in the top 10, top 11 have lost to 2-2, 3-2, 1-3 teams, including, of course, Alabama losing to Vanderbilt, which has just thrown the entire state into a tizzy, right? So clearly this is a wide open field right now nationally. And as you look at a game like this, anything can happen. And at the end of the day, they might meet again in the conference championship game or the playoffs. So it's not the end all be all. But that said, even though I do think Oregon can win this game, the smart money for me is on the team with the better rushing offense and the better rushing defense and 2 ridiculous receivers who are just making plays that are just, sometimes not even human. So my money is on Ohio State, but I'm going to say 10-14. I think 37-23, somewhere in there. I just think they're the superior team top to bottom. That doesn't mean Oregon can't win, but I think the smart money is on the Buckeyes.
When do we get Jordan back?
Thank you. Jordan, where are you?
Wow.
Get us out of here.
All right.
Take the show.
Jordan will probably be back next week if I let him out of the van he's currently being held captive in. But that's it for this episode of Talkin Ducks. Enjoy the game, and we'll be back next week to break down everything that went on with a fine-tooth comb.